Hello everyone. In this video we're going to pick up where we left off in the last video, and you can see here that I have the project open in a browser and we're looking at the same state that we had at the end of the last video. What we're basically going to work on in this video is styling this row of callouts, and we're just going to add some styles, bootstrap classes to the HTML code to make some of these changes. We're also going to put some classes that we create the styling for on some of these, and then we're also going to add some HTML to accomplish that. So those three ways we're going to edit this so that this ends up looking more like this. And really the things that we need to focus on here are, one, this whole row of these callouts is lifted just a little bit above the slide. Two, the icons that are in here are font icons, and they're inside of a container div that has a background color on it. And then the other thing that we're going to style up in order to make ours look like this is we're going to create the uppercase text. We're going to make our buttons look like these, and then we're going to center all of the elements that are inside of each one of these. We're going to center them so that they look like this. So let's get started on that right now. So I'm just going to go over to the code, and we're going to scroll down to where it says container marketing, and then just inside of that there's a row of call-lg-4 divs, and each one of those are columns. And what I'm going to do, just to make this easier to see, is I'm going to put the row at the top, and I'm going to put a couple of line breaks in between each one of these column divs, and then that way when we're looking at it, it'll be easy to see where one card, that's what Bootstrap calls them, cards, where one card ends and the next one starts. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to add some HTML here, because the structure of the page isn't exactly what we would like it to be to add the styling that we're going to add. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to add a div that we're going to call card, because like I said, Bootstrap calls these little boxes of code, they call them cards. Bootstrap does. So just inside of each one of these col-lg-4 elements, inside of each one of those we're going to add a div that has a class of card. So I'm going to select all three of those. I'm just going to do div.card like that, and then I'm going to make sure that it wraps all of the text, buttons, and images that are inside of it. So that's the first thing. The next thing that we need to change in the structure of the page is we need to get rid of these SVGs, because we're not going to use SVG images like this. We're not going to embed them directly in the HTML. What we're going to do is we're going to create a class on an element, and we're going to use CSS to put the image in there. So I'm going to just select each one of those lines and backspace them out, and then I want to add a div inside of there with a class of let's call it card-icon-wrap. So card-icon-wrap, and I'm just going to create a place to put the icon inside of that wrapper that's for that card, and then I'm going to put the I element with a class of BI in there. So now we have in each column we have a card that has inside of it a card icon wrap, which is what's going to be the background for the icon, that square background that we saw in the example, and then we're going to put the icons inside of that. And I think that's really all of the HTML that we need to add or change to get the structure the way we need it to be. So now what we want to focus on is we want to add some classes to the existing code that Bootstrap already has styling for. And so we're going to do that now. So the first thing that we need to do is on each one of the cards that we just created, we need to add 3 classes to the card div. So the card div already has a class of card, but now what we need to do is just add the padding for the card, which is P-3. You can use 1 through 5, and I'm just choosing 3 because it seems to be a nice amount. And then we need to make sure that we add a class that Bootstrap defines that it uses to center the text. So we'll do text-center. And then finally we want to add this class. It's rounded-0. And what that does is it makes the border on each of the cards squared off instead of rounded on the corners, because we're setting the rounding to 0. So you can save that there. And then let's see, what else can we do with just Bootstrap? We can work on these Bootstrap icons first. On each one of those, let's just add BI dash, and we'll click save, or Control S to save it. And then I'm going to go up to the top one, and I'm going to make this be a BI funnel icon. And that's going to be just basically a funnel, and that funnel is going to represent oil changes. And then the second one we're going to use is going to be clipboard dash pulse, and that's going to represent diagnostics. And we'll save that. And then the last one that we want to create is going to be the icon that is the speedometer, and we're going to make that represent tune-ups. So now we have our icons in there, and the only other thing that I think that we can do using the existing Bootstrap classes is just change each one of these BTN-secondaries, change all of those to BTN links, and that'll make them not look like buttons anymore. They'll look like just link text. BTN link, and then Control S to save. After we've done that, now really what we need to do is add our own classes to kind of assist with this. But before we do that, let's go check our progress here. We'll just go to the page and refresh it, and you're going to see these are going to look a lot different on the refresh. You'll see that everything's centered, the buttons are gone, they're just regular links, and we have our icons in there. They're too small, but they are in there, and our text is all centered. And I just noticed one other class we can use. We can put text-uppercase on the H2s, and we can put it on the button links that we just edited. So we can add those to this. And then we're going to begin adding some of our own classes to the HTML so that we can go write the CSS for it. The main one that we're going to do is we're going to add a class called lifted that takes this whole row and raises it up a little bit above this slide. And then we're going to change the z-index for each one of these cards so that they are actually above the slide. And I'll show you why we need to do that, because when we lift this up, if we don't change the z-index, these cards are going to be behind the image. And to fix that, we have to set the Z index on the each one of these cards. So like I said, what we can do is add our text dash uppercase to both this H2. And actually, let's do all of them at the same time. So I'm just going to select all of these H2s, all three of them. And then here I'm going to just add text dash uppercase. And you know what? I'm just going to copy that. Actually, let's not copy that. Let's go down and select the BTN link, because this is where we want to put that other. We want to put the same class on these that we just put on the header. So text dash uppercase. And then we'll save that. And now let's go over and look and just make sure that there's no typos or anything. There we go. So now we've got all of our uppercase text. So now we're ready to start adding our classes to the code. The first one, like I mentioned before, that we need to add is we're going to create a style definition for a class called lifted. And it'll be a row that's lifted. So all we got to do is put the code in the style sheet that lifts this whole row. The other thing we want to do is we want to be able to create some styling for each one of these columns. And to do that, we're going to need to create a class that we're going to define the styling for. And we're going to call that card-wrap. So that's going to be a wrapper for each of the cards. And let's see, what's next? We already did our card icon wrap. That's one we're going to style. That's not part of the Bootstrap class, but since we were creating the element, we already created the class. The next one, on each one of these Bootstrap icons, we want to add some styling to change the size of the font because those icons are too small. So for each one of those, we're going to add the class called card icon. Each one of these is an icon that's inside of a card, so they're card icons. Again, that's not a Bootstrap class. We're going to define what that looks like here in just a little bit. And I think that that's pretty much all we need. There is one other thing I want to tackle while we're in this video, and that is down here at the bottom. Let's see, where is that? There's a back to top, and if you notice, you see the back to top, this basically paragraph. What we want to do is we want to change this paragraph to a div, and then we want to be able to style it and its contents, which is the text back to top. So what we're going to do is we're going to change it from a paragraph to a div while we're still here in the HTML before we start writing CSS. And then we want to come over here, and it's floated to the end, but we want to create a class called BTT, and that's just short for back to top. It's not part of the Bootstrap framework. We're going to write the CSS for that. And I think a div is going to allow us to kind of put it where we want it to be and size it and make it behave the way we want it to. So we'll just save that. So now that we have our code all set and we've got our cards structured right, now we can start working on the CSS. So that's what we're going to do next. And we'll do that just by coming over here to our custom.scss file. And we're going to add the definitions for some of those classes that we just put on those elements. That first one, if you remember, is called lifted, right? And really all we need to do to lift that is put a margin top on it of -4 rems and save that. The next one is that card wrap that we put in the code. And you remember I said that if we lift it but we don't change the z-index of each one of the cards, then it will be under the image. So this is why we put the card wrap around each card, so that we could lift them. Well, not lift them, but if they're lifted, we're going to use this class to change the z-index so that it's higher on the stack than the images in the slideshow. So the z-index, we're just going to set it to 1 instead of leaving it like it is. And then the next one that we're going to style up is going to be the card-icon-wrap. And this has quite a bit, because this is how we're going to style the icons that we added. So the first thing we want to change is, you remember it had that gray background color. So we're going to add background color, and the color that we're going to use is a Bootstrap variable name called gray 200. And so if you just type it like this, $gray-200, then when we run the SAS compiler, it's going to create the right color for us. The other thing we want to do is we want to make sure that the width of each one of those card icon wrappers is a very specific amount. So we're going to set that to 5 rems. And we're going to do the same thing for the height, because we want them to be square. So we're going to set the height, the max height, to 5 rems as well. Now, just because we set the max to it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be that wide. We have to set them, we have to set the width to 5 rems, and we need to set the height to 5 rems so that we get those perfect square backgrounds. And we don't want any margins on any of these wraps, these icon wrappers. So we're going to set the margin, well, I shouldn't say that. I should say we don't want the margin to be set in the y-axis, so we want to set it to 0, and the x-axis we want to set to auto. We want it to automatically have its margins set. And then the other thing we need to do is change the display setting so that it is a block display. So each one of those is going to be displayed as a block level element. After that, we want to set the card icon wrapper to have some interactivity when you interact with it. So we're gonna select the card, and when it gets hovered over, we're going to make sure that we do something to the card icon wrapper. So when that happens, what we want it to do is we want the background color of that card icon wrapper to change. And we're just going to use a Bootstrap variable called primary. So we're going to set whatever the primary color is to be the background color of the icon wrapper. But we're going to do that. We're going to change this element's background color whenever its parent gets hovered over. So it's kind of a little different than what you're used to doing, maybe. but that's what we're going to do. We're looking for the interactivity on this element, but we're going to do something to the appearance of its child element here. And we're going to do something very similar right after this. We're going to go one level deeper, but we're still going to listen for the hover on the card. It's just that we're going to interact with the actual card icon too. And you probably already guessed what we're going to do here. We're going to change the color of the text in the card icon to be a different color, and we're going to make it white. But we're going to do it when the card gets hovered over, just like we did with the wrapper. And when we hover over that card, we want to do something to the button links as well. So we're going to do the same thing again. Card hover. When the card gets hovered over, we're going to operate on the BTN link that is inside of that card. And what we're going to do is we're going to change its color to be the primary color. So it's going to be the same color. The button is going to have the same color of text as the background color of the icon. And then we want to, obviously, one of the reasons why we created the card icon was so that we could change the font size of it. So we want to make sure that we do that. Otherwise, our icons are going to be those little tiny icons that we have right now. So on the card icon, we want to change the font size. I think when I tested this, I thought 3 rems was a nice size for the font. And the color that we're going to use is going to be that same primary color that we're using for the design. So we're going to save that. And then there's just one thing left to do. And that is style that back to top button and style up the interactivity on it. So let's create a couple of definitions for that. Remember, we called it BTT for back to top, and then we might as well just create the other one too. BTT, the hover interactivity of it. So for the BTT class, what we want to do is change the background color to darken, and we're going to do gray-900, and we want to darken it by about 5%, just right off the bat. The font size that we want to use for the icon that we're going to put inside of it is 1.5 rems, and we want to give it a width of 3 rems, and you got to spell the selector right, otherwise it won't work. And the height needs to match the width. And then we want to display it as an inline block element. So display as inline block, that's that one. And finally, we want to align the icon to be in the center. So we're going to do text-align center, and that will style it in its resting state. But when we hover over it, we want to change the background color from darken, from the darken gray that it has when it's not hovered over, which is gray 900, we want to change that to be 10% darker. So we're going to save that, and then all we need to do is just basically run this SAS compiler and see what we get. So if you have your PowerShell or your terminal set up so that you can run your compile command inside of it, just go ahead and run this command to generate that new CSS file, and then after it generates, you should be able to go over and refresh your page to see what results we get. So just refresh it and you should see something similar to what I have here on mine. Now again, it's not a exact replica of our example. This is the example and this is ours, but we're basically accomplishing the same thing. All we got to do is adjust some of the text, maybe some of the color of the text, and touch it up a little bit, and it will resemble very closely the example that we're looking at here. One of the things that I see right off of the top of this is that the example here, these appear to be narrower, and that might just be because this is a static image and ours is actually an actual page. But what we could do is just adjust some of this. See the padding here between the icons? There appears to be a margin around these icons, not the icons but the icon wrappers. See this gap here and these and this? That's not as large on ours, and so maybe we just need to put like an MB3 on each one of the card icon, and we can do that just to test it out and see. So we go over here to the HTML. Each one of these card icon wraps, we could just add like an M3, an M-3 to it, and save that, and then go over and refresh our page, and it looks like that's not going to do the trick. We're going to have to add padding on it instead. So which makes sense, because that's, if we just change this to a P, oh, you know what, well, let's try this first. Save it and then go take a look, see if that does any. Okay, we need to change the level above it. So if we save that, go back here and get rid of these, save that, and then go up here, and instead of making it a P3, just do a P5. That should create more space on the top of each one of those card icon wrappers. So this should fix just this top part. So let's refresh that, and it did. So our icons are now, that looks a lot better. Now all we got to do is maybe put a margin on either the header, or we can put a margin bottom on the card wrapper. Let's try that second one first. Let's on each of the card icon wrap, let's do an MT-3 or an MB-3 margin bottom. We want to add, and we probably should add 5, because the padding that we did here is a 5. So let's see what that does. We refresh it. Alright, so now we've got a little bit more separation here. We might want to drop these down to 4 and maybe this one down to 3. That looks a little too much, like a little too much space. So let's make the MB3s there, and we'll do 4s on this and save that. And go here and refresh it. That looks a little better. We could tinker with it, change the H2, which is easy enough to do in Bootstrap. All you have to do is on the H2s, you can just put a display size. Actually, you don't even have to put a display. All you got to do is give it the H class of the heading you want it to be sized to. So if I want these to be a little smaller than the H2s that they are, I could just add H4. And then if you go back and refresh it, see how the text got a little smaller. So that's going to do it for this video. I look forward to moving on and doing some of this other styling on this home page, but that's going to conclude this video. We have accomplished what we set out to do. And thanks for watching, and I hope you're enjoying the series.